Good afternoon, and you've heard me before, so you know what the routine is. But Glenn and I have a long relationship. 20 years ago almost, Glenn was a student of mine, and when I was teaching marketing at the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology, he was one of the best students I ever had, and he has indicated to me that I was one of the best instructors he ever had. So, however, we need to set the stage for you a little bit, and so Glenn is actually a graduate of Northern Alberta Institute of Technology in marketing program in 1998, and he's got a certificate in public policy administration and immigration law and practices from Bow Valley College in Calgary. It has not been an easy route because the college is in Calgary, of course, which is, what, 400 kilometers from here. And he did his course by driving there for classes and then returning to Edmonton. But Glenn is involved with this professional practice as an immigration consultant for the past 4 years, or for the past 8 years and 4 months. And he spent 11 years in the field from a previous worker under the supervision of another consultant prior to becoming licensed himself. So his company is GES and Associates Consulting Incorporated. And in his spare time, and I can vouch for this, he has a hobby of playing music, and he is a piper. He has been all over, I was going to say the world, but that's not true. He's been to Scotland several times, and when I had my 60th birthday, Glenn came to my home and went up and down the street and piped his pipes, and everybody was looking out the door and saying, what the heck is going on? So he belongs to the Edmonton and District Pipe Band, and he does competitive piping and has competed in the United States in world championships and in Glasgow and several times, as well as annual competition here in Alberta. So if you've ever listened to CBC, and the question was asked just the last speaker, what about the CBC? Well, this is like the CBC, only better, because I'm going to ask Glenn the questions, and he is the knowledge, so he's going to respond to the questions. So I will ask a question, and Glenn will respond. And thanks for being here, Glenn. It's a pleasure to have you and see you, and we've had a friendship for a long period of time. Now, how about your profession? What exactly do you do?
Well, I am an immigration consultant, and I'm authorized to represent, counsel, advise, prepare, and submit applications for clients of the Immigration and Refugees and Citizenship Canada for a fee. There's 2 professional bodies that, under law, that can do what I do, either people like myself who are members of the Immigration Consultants of Canada Regulatory Council or members of a provincial or territorial law society.
Now, in talking to Glenn previously, I know somewhat of his background and his activity. And he used to have an office downtown, but he moved to better real estate on the south side. However, do you need to work under the supervision of a lawyer, or can you work independently?
I can work independently. And what I do is paralegal in nature, although I am not a paralegal per se who can only work under the auspices of a lawyer. That's where we differ. We are a separate profession, and I have my own office. I do have business relationships with lawyers that if I need to call them in or forward cases over, we can work together that way. But I am an independent.
Now, I know Glenn is a little reluctant to do this, but with Peter Mansbridge, they always take a break and they have a commercial. So I can assure you that Glenn is quite willing to give you his business card at the end of the session so that you can find out where he is and what he does and maybe contact him for some of your clients. If we had more people here from Edmonton, it would be more prevalent. But he mentioned paralegal already, and he's close to being a paralegal, but in the immigration business. So how do your clients get to you, Glenn?
The majority of my clients right now are referrals, although I do have a website and I do get a lot of attention that way through general search. I do advertise occasionally in print media like the Metro News or local ethnic newspapers.
Now, because I taught at the college, I run into my students all the time, and a couple of weeks ago, I was on White Avenue, which is, you know, not too far from here kind of thing, but anyway, there was a girl coming down the street, and she appeared that she knew me, and she said to me, "Do you know me?" And I said, "Well, you look familiar, but I'm not sure." She said, "Well, I just wanted to let you know, I graduated from law school out of McGill University last week, and you were an instructor for me at NAIT." So the fact is that referrals go from one situation to the next. And I travel on the disabled transport people, and most of the drivers are from Pakistan, India, or somewhere in the Middle East. A few from South America, but they quite often say to me, "My mother, father, sister, brother, whatever is trying to get to Canada. Can you help me?" Yes, I can, because I know Glenn. So I'm able to refer to Glenn many times, people that want to get here. So have you got any clients from Commonwealth countries, Glenn?
Yes, in fact, the majority of my clients just happen to be from Commonwealth nations. Most of them are from Fiji, but other countries such as Jamaica, St. Lucia, the United Kingdom, and India.
Now, I'm glad he mentioned Jamaica, because my wife may not be here if it wasn't for somebody like Glenn, although she's been here longer than Glenn is old. But she's from Jamaica, born in Cuba, and immigrated to Canada, and I met her at the University in Toronto. So that kind of a situation, you know, you never know where people come from. And even today, our waitress, the girl that's been waiting on us, is from Ethiopia. So it is important to find out where people are at. Now, the discussion was, and Jenny would maybe not alluded to this, but I think it's really important to tell everybody what we're trying to accomplish from the Royal Commonwealth Society, and where we meet and what our activities are, and even the fact that we have professionals like Glenn that can help us. Now, what is the Commonwealth of Nations are the majority of immigrants coming from? And you already mentioned Jamaica, but tell us a few of the countries that you've been involved with.
Well, in 2016, Canada welcomed 296,350 new permanent residents to Canada. A permanent resident is someone who is authorized to come into Canada. They're a landed immigrant and they can remain here. Now, in 2016, 23% of those came from Commonwealth nations. The number one was India at 13%, followed then by Pakistan at 3.8%, the UK, Nigeria, Jamaica, and Bangladesh. Those are the top 6.
And it's quite evident right at the present, because of the insurrection and civil wars and all that kind of thing, that more immigrants are trying to get here. And it astounds me the number, and Glenn said, you know, in excess of 200,000 come to Canada. We have the space. I mentioned this morning, I believe, the population density here in Canada is only about 4 people per square kilometer. In Nigeria, it's in excess of 200 people per square kilometer. So there's a real situation that people are looking for other places to move to that has serenity, peace, job opportunities. So what is Canada's target for 2017 as far as new immigrants are concerned, Glenn?
At the end of October each year, Canada sets its target for the following year, and so for 2017, the projection is 320,000 newcomers through the various programs, which includes an increase of 23% through economic categories. There's federal skilled workers, skilled trades, students that are rolling from temporary into permanent status. Provincial nominees, each province has their own programs to facilitate migration to that province, and so that's included in all of that.
Now, one of the concerns that I have, and talking to Glenn over the phone, and he lives not too far from where I do, but busy man, and so we didn't have a chance to get together to put these questions together. We talked on the phone several times, and I know that Glenn gets involved mostly with people who are here legitimately, and I stand to be corrected if Glenn wants to do that, but people who are here legitimately asking to come to Canada. Now, the other issue was, because I taught at NAIT, I quite often, I believe we're going to answer this question eventually, but students come from other countries, and when they come to Canada to study, if they graduate and are gainfully employed for a defined period of time, then they're allowed to apply for citizenship without going back to their own country and getting in line for what's going on. But can you give us an overview of someone who is trying to enter Canada on a temporary basis or for a longer term?
Well, yeah, Canada's has a variety of programs, and generally if people want to enter Canada on a temporary basis, that is, they may want to be here short term. Someone can come in as a visitor and remain for up to 6 months with the possibility of an extension to that status with support. And then we've got usually a bit longer than 6 months, which are temporary workers or international students. Then, as with most people, once they enter Canada, they want to find a way to stay. And so there are a variety of ways to gain permanent residence. And as you mentioned, international students are a good example. A lot of my clients were temporaries wanting to roll into permanent. A high percentage of the clients are economic candidates. That is, they'll fit into one of the programs such as the Federal Skilled Worker, Federal Skilled Trades, or Canadian Experience class. And again, international students, a good example, or workers. If you've been in Canada as a student or a worker for a period of time, you can qualify for permanent residence. In the case of a student, there's options of, as well as workers, there's provincial programs which are diverse and unique to each individual province. They will nominate the student or the worker, depending on their category, for permanent residence, and that individual can then apply to Canada as a provincial nominee. In the case of students, again, they have gone to school here. Upon graduation, they can apply for a postgraduate work permit, which, depending on how many years they've been a student, can qualify them to work for up to 3 years. As long as they've been working in a skilled occupation, they can then apply for permanent residence. Now, Canada introduced in January 1st, 2015, a new program or rather an application management system to facilitate a rather faster processing for a lot of economic categories, which is called Express Entry, and where this is also based on an Australian model and a New Zealand model, capital resource management, or human capital management, where taking the variables of someone's based on age, education, their work experience, have you studied in Canada, and they enter all of this information into a computer system that will assign them some points, and the government then does random draws on several times a month. They set the score, and then the government issues invitations to apply. So Canada decided it would be faster than having someone at the front desk to screen applications and send ineligible applications back, to just let the computer do it, and basically streamlining it, and then just offering invitations to those that Canada wanted to receive invitations from. So that does speed up the process. There's other permanent residence options. Someone can be sponsored by a spouse, or common law partner, conjugal partner. They can sponsor their parents or grandparents, dependent children. And then, of course, as we'll get to, there is another category of asylum seekers who may have a legitimate claim to remain in Canada longer.
Now, this is just a passing comment, Glenn, and you may not have thought of it, but I know that I consulted with you at some earlier date. I've mentioned that I do travel by the disabled transportation system, and most of the drivers are foreign drivers. However, in many cases, they have married either outside of the country or within the country. And in one particular case, I do have a Caucasian driver who married a girl from the Philippines, and after he got here, found out that she'd been previously married in the Philippines. Now, the fact is that records from foreign countries is relatively difficult to get. And sometimes there's a time delay from the time that Glenn gets involved till a decision is made for them to enter the country, like not just 1 or 2 weeks, but it could be, in fact, months or even years. So, do you recall that case that I talked to you about, Glenn, and this gentleman has a wife that is here in Canada, but hasn't been able to gain citizenship for her because they found out she was previously married in the Philippines. Where do you come into the effort as far as qualifying or validating records coming from another country?
Well, in regards to validating records, usually a client would have to pursue in their own country getting the necessary documents. They would have to be validated by a lawyer. With an immigration application, Canada has a screening process. CSIS, Canadian Security and Intelligence, does all of the background checks. In the case of someone that may have been previously married, again in the Philippines, based on their rules, Canada needs to see certain documents to confirm that previous relationship has been ended before another one has started. And so I have to work with the client to, it depends on the case, of course, to get the necessary documents. Sometimes it's a challenge, sometimes we can't do it.
And that's not just the case with the Philippines, that's the case with every country that's coming, Commonwealth countries included, and in the African countries, records are not kept the best, and not everybody has a computer. Now, just recently, the Alberta government changed the rules of engagement or for part-time workers for a couple of reasons, mainly because our employment rate went from a positive situation, in other words, we couldn't find enough employees, to a situation where the oil sands has had a downturn, and hotels, restaurants, service industry, all that kind of thing laid off people. So Glenn's situation was affected by the government passing legislation that the rules had to change for temporary employees.
Oh yeah, it was actually a coincidence because in 2014, in response to maybe a lot of public pressure as well, the government decided to change the rules as far as the temporary foreign worker program was coast to coast, and in essence wanted to wean Canadian businesses off of the reliance of temporary workers. So anyone that was accessing the program before the legislation changed, they were capped at 30% for 12 months, and then the following year they were reduced to 20%, and then the third year, which would have been from July 1st, 2016 onward, they would have been capped to 10% of their labor force being temporary foreign workers. Now, the Liberal government, when they came in, they left the cap at 20%. And the coincidence being, by the time 2015 rolled around and the economy was slowing down, combined with another legislative change that happened in 2011 where temporary workers were only permitted to work cumulatively in Canada for a period of 4 years. 2015 saw the economy really grinding to a halt, and a lot of temporary workers, if they didn't change their status, they had to leave the country. And of course, that meant there was a lot of vacancies in the labor force that were filled by them, but now we've got a rapidly increasing employment rate, especially in the oil sands, and so a lot of those positions were filled by people that were Canadians. They were released from employment, and they were desperate for work. And more recently in Alberta, in response to again legislative changes, Alberta approached Canada and said that they made an agreement. It's a temporary agreement that 29 occupations. They didn't want Canada to process approvals for certain occupations simply because they wanted employers to pursue, again, Canadian employees coast to coast that could fill those jobs. And ranging from truck drivers, short-haul, long-haul truck drivers, right up to civil engineers, mechanical engineers, even oil and well site supervisors. And I had to sleuth this as a consultant because clients would come to me and want assistance with the program, and there's nowhere published on a public website of these 29 occupations. And simply their response to me was that because it's going to be temporary, they're not going to publish it. And that's just me being proactive in looking out for the client. We can't apply for truck drivers simply because you're going to get refused.
And you see the dilemma they're at is from the government standpoint of view. In unemployment statistics, we have Canadians that were refused jobs and they're maybe fresh out of high school. They certainly qualify for a lot of the temporary positions that were being filled by temporary workers. So thus the government put these restrictions on, and so, you know, it enhances Glenn's activity as far as that is concerned. Now, we already mentioned the route for existing institutional, i.e. students that are here from the educational standpoint of view, but just to reiterate, and by the way, it's time for a commercial, so don't forget that Glenn exists here in Edmonton and is certainly available with his business card. You can speak to him after, but not just today or tomorrow or next week, but for a long time. He's going to be in business for a long time. And Canada as a nation is a very favorable country to come to. So there are lots of people coming in here, in excess of 200,000 per year. So what about these students that are already here or trying to get here, Glenn?
Again, and this is sort of what led me to get into this profession. My entire social circle now are majority permanent residents and Canadian citizens, but they started out as international students. And through pains that they experienced motivated me and led me to become, to do what I do. Now, international students, again, in Alberta specifically, there's a provincial program. Upon graduation, they can work in a skilled occupation and they can apply directly to the province of Alberta and become a provincial nominee and then apply for permanent residence. Other provincial programs have some similar nuances for students, or again, a student can apply direct federal if they qualify through some other federal economic program. Many going to school may meet their significant other and they will get married here, and of course then I can help them with the sponsorship application. But there's provincial and then federal direct options for students.
One of the statistics that you may not know, but foreign students pay 3 times the tuition to go to universities and colleges here in the province of Alberta as normal students do. So if the tuition fee is $3,000 a year for a Canadian student, the foreign students pay probably $10,000, and they all have the money. You know, there's no shortage of money. And I took a survey in my course a couple of times, and I said, how many drive cars? Well, about 75% of them put up their hands. How many own cars? Well, about 48% put up their hand. How many bought their own car when they came to Canada? 45% put up their hand. 45% of those people paid cash for their car. Now these people don't buy ordinary cars, they buy upscale cars, you know. I was amazed. Where do they work? They work at the casino downtown here to get money, or they just phone their parents and say, send more money. Because I asked the question, when the price of oil went down, I said, and I teach economics and marketing, I said, you know, this price in oil is going to affect your tuition. So what are you going to do like next term? It's no problem. We'll just phone my father. So that's that's what they do. One child commitment in China makes sure that that child succeeds, and so they come to Canada here to get an education. Now recently, Glenn, there has been a great international conflict throughout the world. How has that affected you, and do you have any people who are either refugees or coming from countries of conflict that you have looked after?
Well, currently I have had no clients that are fall into the refugee category, although I have provided counsel to several, and which definitely alludes to you know, options for how someone wants to enter Canada or seeks asylum, and you've got those who make a claim that they enter Canada somehow other than crossing the border of the U.S. And make a claim inland, or if they're outside Canada, or maybe in some UN convention refugee organization, they may be sponsored by individuals or organizations to come in as a refugee.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask you a question, and you know, the church that I go to, and Jane was here just yesterday, we did sponsor somebody coming from Syria. Do you get involved with groups of people, or church groups, or charity groups who are sponsoring somebody to come into the country that you have an interest in?
Well, definitely I can do that, and if there's an organization that is seeking counsel and advice and wants me to help them through the process, that's the nature of my job, and they would contract me to help them through the process. Usually I start with an initial consultation, and then I screen the potential candidate to provide them insight and also to determine their eligibility and find the best fit for that person or organization to be a sponsor.
Okay. Now, in relationship to people coming into the country, what is the most controversial situation that you've been faced with as far as an immigrant is concerned?
Well, most of my clients are economic class and are already in Canada. There is, and again, I've had one particular individual who came in through the United States, although he didn't engage me, but was wanted to claim refugee status in Canada, who had been right out of Iraq. He had been converted from Islam to another religion, and was basically targeted, and was given the advice by local police that he should, they couldn't help him, he had to leave. And so he came through the United States, and I guess this is where We are now seeing a lot more of this, more in Manitoba, but cross the border through the trees or a space in the fence, and hopped a plane to Edmonton, and I got a phone call. So that happens. So that is raising obviously more concerns, especially in Manitoba, where the controversy is more on the U.S. side, driving people to run to Canada.
Right, and you probably know the situation. We haven't had it happen here in Alberta, but certainly in Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec, as Glenn alluded to, these people coming across the border illegally. So what kind of a problem does that present to somebody like yourself, Glenn?
Usually these people are seeking my advice on how to stay in Canada or how to lay a refugee claim. I am, as an authorized representative, if someone seeks my counsel, there's always confidentiality. There has to be a safe place for someone to go and talk. So there's, again, lawyers or myself, and the difference between them calling the government call center is that the call center will receive information and give information, but if you could confess information innocently and be in breach of the law, and if you provide them enough information about yourself and how to get a hold of you, then you've got letters or border services on your case. But in these particular cases of people crossing the border, they're crossing the border outside of a port of entry. So if they cross through a farmer's field after dark, or through the trees within sight of the Peace Arch in Surrey, then they are entering Canada illegally. If they cross at a land border between us and the United States, Canada has agreement with the United States. It's called the Safe Third Country Rule. And they approach border services or an immigration officer and say, I want to lay a claim. Canada is authorized to, say, return to the United States. Vice versa, if they come through Canada and want to lay a claim in the United States, and they enter a land border, if they cross at Coots, then the U.S. Homeland Security will turn them around and say, lay your claim in Canada. So the issue, which again is raising mention in Parliament as well, or beginning to, is people crossing the border illegally.
Okay, and maybe one last comment. We certainly don't have the problem here in Canada that they have at the Mexico border. We've had fewer than, say, 2,000 people come across the border, and as Glenn says, there is a mechanism to turn them around and send them back to where they came from. But one question that we haven't approached, Glenn, is medical conditions or concerns that somebody coming into Canada might have in respect to our medical facilities that are available here for normal Canadians. How does the immigration people deal with that?
If someone is entering Canada as a refugee, let's say if they're being sponsored, potentially there is one program, a joint assistance program that is between the federal government, immigration, and an organization that is willing to be the sponsor, and that is to facilitate people that may be victims of trauma as a result of war or issues like we're seeing now in Syria, or they may have medical conditions, and in some cases, if they are fleeing conflict but could receive treatment outside Canada, but where they're from, to wait for a medical appointment, you have to wait in line for 3 years, as an example. Yeah. Outside Canada, if they're refugees, then there are possible programs to help them, but usually these programs are you already have to have UN Convention refugee status conferred upon you before you can access one of these types of programs, like sponsorship, as your church did, or any other organization. Usually the refugee is already deemed a refugee by the UN Convention. But someone who is in Istanbul and contacts me because they're about to board a plane and wants my assistance, that's a little different. We might try to find another option for them if there's one available, but medical inadmissibility is definitely grounds for someone to be refused a permanent resident visa. So there may have to be some other program or issue involved.
Okay, and just one last comment. Glenn works with a lawyer, like a legal representative, and he was going to be here, so he could have did the interview. So Glenn and him would converse with each other. And is his name Obi?
Ido.
Pardon?
Ido?
Yeah, Ido. Yeah. His name is Ido, and I did talk to him, but unfortunately he is away on a conference, a law conference, and so he wasn't able to be here. So Glenn had said that he would be here, and he did. He showed up, and I'm very grateful that he did show up, and I even appreciate having the opportunity to interview him, and I appreciate your attention.